Now, another of the big energy companies hiked its prices today. Centrica, owner of British Gas, is going to charge customers over another 9% a year on average for gas and electricity. That is more than 3 times the rate of inflation. The Prime Minister used the unenergetic adjective disappointing to describe the price rises. As for doing anything about it, the advice remains the same: shop around. This is, no pun intended, a highly charged issue because Labour has promised to cap energy costs for a while if elected, while the company themselves blame government taxes and obligations. Andy Verity reports.
British Gas is advertising today for a new social media manager. Successful applicants may have to invite customers on Twitter to #AskBG. But with these tweets after their price rise today, would you take the job?
Which items of furniture do you, in your humble opinion, think people should burn first this winter?
British Gas, freezing pensioners, not prices.
Do the British Gas Board prefer to bathe in £20 or £50 notes?
When you tell 8 million households they'll pay £100 a year extra for their energy, you'll have no problem generating heat.
Well, I think these are very disappointing announcements by British Gas. I think there are things we can do. We are intervening because we're legislating to say these companies have to put their customers onto the lowest tariff.
I think, frankly, we need some relief from these rising energy prices, and in the meantime we need a government that will actually stand up to the energy companies and fix the broken market. Because why are these prices going up? It's because we've got a market that's not working and companies that are overcharging people.
Against that blizzard of public criticism, AskBG sought shelter in a fact. Does the big bad energy company have a point?
The power companies point out that most of the costs pushing your bill up aren't within their control. If the market price for energy rises, they have to pay it. But they point out there is a chunk of your bill which is under politicians' control. Government-imposed costs, like subsidising the likes of that.
If you've driven down the M4 near Reading, you might recognise this. When the wind's too high, it can't generate electricity. Too low, and it won't generate much. Running at 16% of its capacity, it's among the least effective wind turbines in the country. As with other turbines, about half its income comes from subsidies.
We're throwing money at this industry. They're making enormous profits, but they're not driving down costs. They're not providing an alternative to coal for the developing world. It's actually counterproductive.
So is it this that brings misery to your letterbox when the bill arrives? Well, actually, you'll pay more for this, a British Gas campaign under the so-called ECO scheme. The energy company's obligation forces firms to hit targets for helping people on low incomes or in old, drafty homes. But first, they have to find them. They can't use data from the benefit system because of privacy laws, so it costs hundreds of pounds to find each needy household, and you pay. For those who prefer light to heat, this is what energy policies do to your bill. Right now, they're just the blue slice, 9% of your bill, or £112. Of that, the biggest amount, £47, subsidises insulation and new boilers for hard-pressed households. £11 pays for rebates to 2 million people in fuel poverty, the warm home discount. £7 rewards households that generate energy with wind turbines and solar panels. £8 is what firms are forced to pay for permits to emit carbon. £5 funds government efforts to keep the price of carbon up. And £3 for smart meters and better billing. And £30 goes on the renewables obligation that funds alternative energy like wind farms. That's 2% of your bill.
Now, in 5 years' time, your bill money won't just be paying to subsidise these. You'll also be paying nuclear generators to produce energy at far more than the market price.
You can buy wholesale electricity at a market price of £52 per megawatt hour, but reports today say your energy company will have to pay nuclear generators like Hinkley Point £93 per megawatt hour, nearly double the market price, and that will come off your bill.
Subsidies to renewables have made everybody else uncompetitive. They can't make a living in this market, even if they are fundamentally economic, like gas. So is nuclear economic? Well, nobody knows. What we do know is they can't make a living in this distorted market, so they want a subsidy too. Everybody wants a subsidy now because renewables have a subsidy.
These are the government's own figures showing the total effect of all their policies on your bill. This year, they'll add 17% to bills. In 2020, they'll add 33%, and by 2030, they'll increase bills by 41%. Politicians don't all blame the power companies.
This whole George Osborne criticism of green taxes is extraordinary because It was George Osborne and the Tories who insisted on putting a carbon price floor in the coalition agreement. The Liberal Democrats didn't want it. The Department of Energy and Climate Change didn't need it to make sure that the electricity sector actually decarbonises. And it was a straight revenue-raising measure. So this is utter hypocrisy on the part of George Osborne, and he ought to scrap it.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies says green taxes on bills are now so high it's as if VAT was paid at the top rate. And you pay even more in green taxes outside your bill.
Companies are paying things like the climate change levy. They're clearly paying the European Emission Trading Scheme costs. And they're paying this thing called the carbon reduction commitment. And of course someone has to pay for that. Now that may be that we all pay higher prices, it may be that the profits of the companies are lower, it may be that their workers are earning less, but those effects, whilst hidden in terms of households, are there.
The man now proposing to freeze bills once imposed new green taxes, and his opposition counterpart supported him. Those policies were designed to make energy more expensive. The trouble is, they succeeded.
Now, in a moment, the Energy Secretary, the Liberal Democrat Ed Davey, but first his Labour shadow, Caroline Flint. What is it, do you think, that bill payers are having to pay for they shouldn't have to pay for?
Well, I think they are being overcharged. We've looked very closely at the cost, the wholesale cost of electricity, gas over the last 4 years. And what we've seen is they went down substantially in 2009. That was never reflected in bills. And the markup price between wholesale costs and the retail price, we reckon about 2/3 of it cannot be accounted for. About a third of it is issues around the green levies, insulation and other asks.
So what is it they shouldn't be having to pay for?
Unreasonable.
What is it they shouldn't have to be paying for?
The bill payers?
Yeah.
What they should be paying for is something
what
that
they should not be paying for.
Should not be paying for.
Yeah.
Well, what they shouldn't be paying for is unreasonable profits that the energy companies are making.
And you determine whether they're reasonable or not, do you?
Well, we've looked very closely, Jeremy, at the wholesale costs because that's something that the energy companies always tell us put up prices. We believe, looking at the evidence, that actually there is no case for that. But the truth is we need to reform this market because we have a vertically integrated structure, which means these companies create energy, renewables, gas, other forms of energy, nuclear, sell it to themselves and sell it on to us, and we want to break that wide open.
Right, but you're perfectly happy with bill payers paying for green energy, paying an insulation subsidy and all that sort of thing?
Well, I think it's the case, from nationalisation to privatisation, there has always been some sort of social tariff or obligation to help the fuel poor.
And you're happy with it?
I think actually it's a good thing to do to help people insulate homes. On the green levies, which are a fraction of the bill, something like only 5% or even less of the bill, that's about an investment in our future.
If you're happy with that?
I'm happy with investing in a cleaner, cheaper future.
It's the profit motive you object to.
What I object to is the distortion in this market we currently have with 6 companies dominating 98% of it.
If you feel that strongly about it, why don't you just advocate renationalisation?
Because I don't think that's the answer either. I think it's about making the market more transparent and more competitive. And the truth is, actually, if you look at the big 6, they really do reflect what were the regional monopolies under nationalisation, and that's what we want to change.
How can the market be transparent if you in government were setting the price?
No, we are saying we'll have a temporary freeze for 20 months, which 1 recognises the overcharging, but 2 allows us to bring in legislation to reform the market.
But you speak on behalf of the party that in government saw the average energy bill double.
Energy bills did go up from 2005, but they're going up at 3 times the rate in the last 3 years, as we've seen bills go up by £300 and £400. And that is why we recognise that spanning several governments, including our own, something has gone wrong with this market, and why we've come to the view that it needs to be changed. And that means reorganising the way this market works, opening up, breaking down the vertical integration that currently exists, and having a power exchange where all energy is in an open space where energy can be bought and sold on to us.
To be clear about this, you would fix the market because you would set what price could be laid. You would also continue to pass on to bill payers the charges that government is currently levying. Both of those things are true, are they?
What we would be doing is having a temporary price freeze, but we would give a new regulator the power to monitor much more closely the wholesale costs. And if the wholesale costs fall and those reductions aren't reflected in our bills, a new regulator would have the power to force those companies to pass that reduction on. But I have to say, whilst it's quite right that we keep a close eye on subsidies for renewables and nuclear and make sure we're getting a fair deal, while it's quite right that we should keep under review the money we ask bill payers to support to energy efficiency schemes, they have to be part of what will be a cleaner and cheaper future in terms of our energy supply.
Caroline Flint, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Ed Davey is here now, the Energy Secretary. What is your advice to people who may have a genuine belief they cannot pay these new bills?
Well, I do think they can switch. We've seen a big increase in competition under this coalition government. We've deregulated. There are now 8 independent suppliers challenging the big 6, thanks to our policies. People can make big savings by going to these companies.
Which companies do you think they should switch to?
Well, there are 8 independent suppliers. They're all on the USwitch website. People can go and see them, and people can see them from the energy advice that's available on our hotline.
Given what we know of how the energy companies behave, only a fool would change from a company which has already raised its price to one which is about to do so when they don't know what they're going to raise it to.
Well, if you go and look now, you'll find one company will allow you to fix for 2 years to April 2015, and on the British gas tariff before this price rise, you could have saved nearly 150 quid. So after this price rise, you'll be able to save 250 quid. So there are some really big savings to be had out there, thanks to the competition that we've now got into the market.
When did you last switch your energy supplier?
Earlier this year.
And who did you switch to?
I switched to Sainsbury's Energy. I did something called the Big London Energy Switch, which was our idea to enable people to come together to get a better deal in the market, pooling their purchasing power. I was part of that, and I saved over £200.
What do you set your thermostat to at home?
I'm not absolutely sure, to be honest, Jeremy. My wife tends to take care of that.
But I mean, do you advise? You do give advice, don't you? You say, there's no need to overheat your home. There's no need to have the air conditioning on, or if you have air conditioning, you do. And what do you recommend?
Well, to my wife.
Yeah. What is a sensible temperature for people to have at their home?
Well, a lot depends on, of course, the building and the insulation, because what we're trying to say is insulate your home more, do things like the Green Deal, use the energy company obligation, because if you insulate your home more, you can turn the heating down.
People are too accustomed not to wear jumpers?
Well, I'm sure people do wear jumpers. I wear jumpers at home, but I think you're missing the point. Missing the point here, Jeremy. We do need to help people with these bills. I'm extremely worried about them. We can use competition the way we have, but we can also make our homes warmer, and we can use less electricity and gas by going energy efficient, and that's what the government's trying to do.
About 17% of these bills is government charges, right?
No.
No, what is it?
4% is the green levies, and 5% is the social charges on things like fuel poverty, helping the poorest in our society manage their bills. I'm very supportive of those. I'm also supportive of helping people make their homes more energy efficient.
What about nuclear?
Well, I hope to make an announcement shortly about that nuclear investment.
That will raise the price of energy, won't it?
Well, the first time a nuclear power station is likely to be generating is in the next decade, possibly even as far as 10 years ahead. Now, if it's that far ahead, we won't be paying for that energy, that nuclear energy, for 10 years' time. When we do pay, we'll be in quite a different world. We'll probably see higher gas prices, we'll see carbon prices, and therefore it's quite likely, and I hope to be able to set this out in due course, that nuclear can be very competitive.
Why do you believe that people who are paying bills should pay for all of this as opposed to the taxpayer?
Well, it does make sense through the energy industry rather than the taxpayer actually paying it.
If it was paid by the taxpayer, of course, there would be something progressive about it, wouldn't there?
Well, we get progressivity and fairness in the system through things called the warm home discount. 2 million of the most vulnerable people in our society, over 1 million of the poorest pensioners, get money, £135 directly off their bill, and that produces fairness in the way we balance our social and energy and our environmental policies.
Do you think the system's working well?
Well, we need more competition, and we inherited from the last lot the big 6. We think the big 6 have been a real problem, and that's why we've deregulated. We've now got 8. Your eyebrows going up at Jeremy.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 8
The question was whether you think the system's working well.
It's working better. We need to do more.
It's not working well then.
Well, it's been working better since we improved competition. And in our energy bill before Parliament, we are helping to simplify tariffs, to make bills simpler, and to get more competition in the wholesale market. So I'm not satisfied. I'm not satisfied at all. I think what we inherited before was not good enough. We're dramatically increasing competition because I want
changes. It isn't just a case of what you
consumers.
inherited, though, is it? I mean, you, for example, set the carbon floor, didn't you?
We did indeed.
And as Chris Huhne has testified in that piece of tape we just saw a moment ago, that was something that was insisted upon by George Osborne, was agreed to by you, and which has raised bills.
Well, it's about 1% on people's bills, slightly less than 1%. So I don't think we can actually put off all these prices onto that, because most of the price rises are coming from the wholesale.
Yeah, but the money's not being spent upon energy, it's being given to the Treasury.
Well, it is very important to send a very important price signal to investors in low carbon. What we are seeing, now this is the other missing part of the equation. How much investment have we seen? We've seen £35 billion of investment in clean energy and our electricity infrastructure. We need that investment urgently. We have an energy security problem in this country. You read reports about it. Why do we have that problem? Because we've had over a decade and a half without that investment. The coalition government is turning that round. We're now seeing tens of billions of pounds investment. So I can say to you, under this government, we'll be able to keep the lights on, and we're making investments for the future. So not only will bills be lower in the future because of the investments we're making, but we can have energy security in this country.
David, thank you very much.